these pink two objects are the poles of the electromagnet. So between these two poles, you're going to have a uniform magnetic field. And then in this magnetic field, you're going to have a pair of Ds. So Ds are made up of non-magnetic metals like copper, and they have the shape of a tablet, half a tablet, and actually it's hollow inside. Okay, and why should they be made of non-magnetic metals like copper? The reason is discussed last time. Inside the body of a metal, a charged particle will not experience any electric field. That is because of what is called Faraday effect. Or you studied this in chapter number 29, that there will be electric field only outside the body of a conductor. So you don't want your charged particle to experience electric field when it is inside the D. Then another reason why you are using a non-magnetic material is because if this was made up of a magnetic material, there will be magnetization of the material because of the field that you are applying, because of the magnetic field you are applying. Therefore, your charge would be able to see a field, not the applied field B. It will see some other field, which is not what you want. That is the reason why the material is made of non-magnetic metal. Then after that, I told you, between the 2 days, you're going to apply an oscillating. Oscillating means a potential difference that is going to change direction. And you're going to set the frequency of this oscillator equal to the cyclotron frequency. Then from the center, you're going to release a charged particle. So between the 2 Ds, okay, like for example, at one instant of time, what happens is one of the plate will be positive and the other will be negative. One will be positive and the other will be negative. Let's say this is negative and this is positive. Or let me put it the other way. Let's say this plate is positive and this becomes negative. So what happens to the positive charge particle? Positive charge particle quickly gets an acceleration and enters into the D. But once it enters, what happens is it won't experience an electric field. And you know that whenever there is a charge acting on an electric field, there is a force. Okay, and because of this force, there is an acceleration or there is a speeding of the electron happening. Or this potential difference or the electric field is responsible for accelerating the charged particles. And then it enters, and once it enters, it experiences the magnetic field. So it comes around trying to come out in a circle, but when it makes half a circle itself, it is able to come out. And between the Ds, this time what happens is the polarity will change. Because it's an AC voltage that you're applying, the polarity would have got reversed. So what happens is this plate will become negative, this plate will become negative and this plate will become positive. So a charged particle that is coming out will see this negative and get accelerated. Okay, now it will go through a bigger circle. Once it reaches here, again the polarity will change, there will be an acceleration. So now it goes through a bigger circle. So that this way, every time it is coming out, it's going to get accelerated. And for that acceleration, there should be a matching of frequency between the oscillator frequency and the cyclotron frequency. And then, of course, we set up the equations also. We have seen how the kinetic energy of the charged particle that emerges will be half q square v square capital R square by m, where capital R is the radius of the D. And I gave you an example of a typical cyclotron. Normally, a cyclotron cannot have a radius more than, Ds cannot have a radius more than 1 meter because it's very difficult to have large electromagnets. Please remember, electromagnets will have coils and coils of current through which you're going to pass the current. There will be heating. So to prevent that heating, you have to have water flowing. Okay, there will be a cooling system through which water has to flow and then remove the heat. Okay, so this entire thing is very cumbersome. You cannot have very large Ds. So for a D of 1 meter, proton can be accelerated to energies between 10 and 40 mega electron volt. And then I also told you this, the energy of the particles that you are finally going to get, the energy of the charged particles that you're going to get is dependent on the magnetic field. Look at this equation. It is dependent on the magnetic field. It does not depend on the voltage or the electric field. But what is interesting is that the real acceleration is happening because of the voltage or the electric field. But that factor doesn't appear in the kinetic energy equation. Then, of course, I have asked, if the magnetic field is not going to accelerate or speed up your charged particle, then what is the role of the magnetic field? The role of the magnetic field is to bring this charge in circles so that every time it is going to come between the D's and experience an acceleration. The next thing is, why is the maximum kinetic energy achieved independent of the applied potential difference? Okay, to make you understand this, I will be doing a problem, then we'll answer this question. And then next, why is resonance condition important? Resonance condition is important because every time it comes out, it should have the right polarity. Otherwise, what will happen is, it will see a retarding potential, it will get slowed down. That should not happen. So there should be a match with the frequency with which these plates are going to change polarity and the frequency of the cyclotron, which you get from the formula. Then, okay, so I gave you 10 to 40 mega electron volts is the maximum energy that you can get. This is what I told you using a cyclotron. Okay, now you want to accelerate charged particles to greater speeds. Then what should you do? In that case, what you need to do is remember the equation for the angular frequency. The angular frequency is omega is equal to V by R is equal to QB by M. So you use something called a synchrotron. So there what happens is, now first you will use it like a cyclotron till it reaches a certain velocity. When it reaches a certain velocity, it starts going around in a circle. It goes around in a circle of some radius R. Okay. Now what you do is keep the radius fixed. Now keep the radius fixed. Okay. Keep the radius fixed. And so look at this equation. Keep your radius fixed, but you want your velocity to go up. Please look at this equation, guys. You're keeping the radius fixed, but you want your velocity to go up. How can you achieve that? Anyone? Look at this equation and answer. Look at this equation and answer. V by R equal to QB by M. I want to keep my R a constant, but I want to increase the velocity. How do I do that? There are 49 students and nobody is able to answer. Look at this equation and try to answer. I want to increase V, but my R is a constant. The radius of the path is now kept a constant, but I want to increase V. How do I do that? I'm telling you it's there in the equation. Can you look at the equation and tell me? I have a charge particle of charge Q, mass M. It is moving in a circle of radius R, but I want to increase its velocity. So what should I do? I have to increase the magnetic field. So if I keep increasing the magnetic field, then what happens is the velocity will keep increasing. Look at the left side of the equation. If B increases, then this right side is increasing. Proportionately, your velocity also will increase if R is going to be a constant. Okay, now this kind of a setup is called a synchrotron. And using a synchrotron, you can achieve actually higher energies. You can go up to 1000 giga electron volts. Okay, now let's work out this problem. I have a cyclotron with the D's of radius 0.75 meter. Radius of the D is 0.75 meter. And then the magnet is giving a magnetic field B equal to 1.5 Tesla. Now, what should be the cyclotron frequency is the question. To what frequency should the oscillator be set if deuterons are to be accelerated? I hope you know what's a deuteron. Deuteron is going to have a mass 3.34 into 10 to the power of minus 27 kg, and it will have the charge of a proton. Okay, so now you have to set the oscillator to the frequency of the cyclotron, or F is equal to QB by 2 pi M. Now substitute, you will get 11 megahertz. 11 megahertz. What is the meaning of 11 megahertz? Anyone? Eleven megahertz means 11 into 10 to the power of 6 times it will go around in a circle in 1 second. That's what it means. Now let's find out what is the maximum kinetic energy of these deuterons. You know the expression for kinetic energy, it is half m V max square. Okay, so therefore what we will now do is, when it is coming out, when it is coming out of the cyclotron, when it is coming out of the cyclotron, it is actually going to have a radius equal to r. Radius equal to capital R, which is the radius of the D. Okay, so the radius of the D is given as 0.75 meter. Therefore, you can simply say that Vmax is equal to R omega. Okay, so let's just put that there. So half m into R omega whole square. So this capital R square, you take it out, and then omega. Omega is 2 pi f. I already have the equation for f. So just substitute for omega, half m r square omega. So it's 2 pi f. That's the reason why this 2 pi is not there. So you have only qb by m whole square. Okay, now substitute and you will get 30 mega electron volts. So the charge particle that is going to come out, the neutron that is going to come out, is going to have a kinetic energy equivalent of 30 mega electron volts. How did I get this 30 mega electron volts? I will directly get the answer in joules only. I will get the answer in joules only. Then I have to divide by 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 19. Then I get it in mega electron volts. Now I have a question for you. This question is not there in the book. If the potential difference applied, between the D's is 1000 kilovolt. So my D's are here, and I am applying an oscillator frequency of 1000 kilovolt. So 1000 followed by 30 volt. Okay, then how many times should this charge particle go around? How many times should this charge particle go around before it is able to get that speed of 30 mega electron volt? I'm not going to give the answer for this question. You have to tell me what it is going to be. Only hint I'll give you is, for each rotation, for each cycle, it gets accelerated twice. Okay, that's the hint. And how much is the acceleration each time? You have to find from here. Okay, acceleration each time is going to be equal to Q into delta V. Delta V is already given to you. This is not there in the book. I just added this part of the syllabus and I'm asking you to do it yourself. Okay, now let's move ahead. Anything you want to ask? Okay, if you have nothing to ask, I'm going ahead. Maruti Gaud, do you have anything to ask? No, ma'am. Did you even see the slide that I showed you? Did anyone see the slide that I showed you? So what did you see there? Unmute and answer. Avantika, have you seen that slide? I made an important announcement. Okay. Yeah. So one person has seen. I made an important announcement. I will not announce it again. Those of you who have not seen the slide need not bother. Okay. Now that we have completed that part, we are going to Hall effect. Hall effect is the next application. And this Hall effect is something that you're going to see in the lab today. Okay, today's class, madam is going to take. She will explain that to you. So let's see what is Hall effect, but I will be explaining the theory behind it. So when a current carrying flat strip of conductor or semiconductor, so this is a flat strip of conductor or semiconductor having a width W and a thickness T, having a width W and a thickness T. Therefore, the area of cross section is going to be WT. Okay. Now you're going to pass a current I. If you're going to pass a current I and then put the flat surface perpendicular to the magnetic field, you're going to apply a magnetic field. Look at the direction of the magnetic field given to you. It's a uniform magnetic field. It is perpendicular to the magnetic field. Then what happens is, in a direction perpendicular to both the magnetic field and the current, in a direction perpendicular to the magnetic field and the current, you're going to see a potential difference. You're going to see a potential difference, and that potential difference is called the Hall potential. And this effect is called Hall effect. That means if I take a point here, X, and if I take a point here, Y, if I take a voltmeter and put it across the point X and Y, I will see a voltage. And this voltage is in a direction perpendicular to both the current direction and the magnetic field direction. This effect is called Hall effect. Okay. And now let us try to understand what is this Hall effect. How exactly this voltage is created. So here is an enlarged picture. Okay, so now you look at this. You know that whenever a charge particle is moving, it will experience, in a magnetic field, it will experience a force FB is equal to QV cross B. Okay, now first let us assume that what we have is some semiconductor or a conductor, and let us assume that there may be positive charges, there may be negative charges. Okay, and if I have a current in this direction, then I know that the negative charge will move opposite in direction to the current, with the drift velocity Vd. Similarly, if it's a positive charge, the positive charge will move parallel to the current with a drift velocity Vd. Okay, and now we have put this plate in a uniform magnetic field. You can see magnetic field is perpendicular to the current. So now let us see what happens to these moving charges. We have seen that moving charge will experience a force Fb is equal to QV cross B, which is Vd cross B, because Vd is the drift velocity of the charged particles. Okay, now let us use our right hand rule and look at what will be the direction of the force on the negative charge. Okay, so my drift velocity is this, magnetic field is this. So if I look at my thumb, the thumb shows the direction of the magnetic force if it is a positive charge. But since it's a negative charge, okay, I find that the force is going to be in an opposite direction. So this is going to be the force experienced by the negative charge. I'm sorry, this is going to be the force experienced by the negative charge. Yeah, this is a negative charge. Now, similarly, if you look at what is going to happen to the positive charge, you'll find that the drift velocity in this case is opposite to what we have seen for the case of electrons. So once more, if I apply a right-hand rule, I will find that the positive charge also will experience a force in the same direction. Now, let us assume that our material is a p-type semiconductor. Let's assume that our material is a p-type semiconductor. If it's a p-type semiconductor, then your protons are going to be few in number. Protons are going to be large number. Electrons will be few in number. So as a result, what happens is, because of this FB force that is going to be there, in a short time, you will have an accumulation of positive charges. You will have an accumulation of positive charges or holes on one side, and deficiency of holes or negative charge on the other side of the plate. Okay, and you know that whenever there is a positive charge, you can talk about a positive potential, and a negative charge is a negative potential. So that explains why there is a potential difference between the points X and Y. The points X and Y. Okay. Now here, what did we do? We have assumed that it is P-type semiconductor. P-type semiconductor, charges are flowing positive on one side, negative on another. Okay. Or this potential difference that you're seeing between the two phases is called the Hall voltage. This is called the Hall voltage. Okay. Now, if you take a voltmeter and put it across X and Y, if you put it across X and Y, you will find that the voltage will be positive. Hall voltage will be positive for a P-type semiconductor. For a P-type semiconductor, it will be positive. If it is an N-type semiconductor, if it's an N-type semiconductor, or let us say it is a conductor. In a conductor also electron only carries current. In a N-type semiconductor also electrons will carry current. So if it is an electron, what happens, you see, the current direction is this, the drift velocity direction is going to be this. So what you will find is, okay, VD cross B, force will be in this direction if it is a positive charge, but because it's a negative charge, what happens is the force will be to the right. The force will be to the right. So as a result, you will have an accumulation of negative charges on this phase and positive charge on the opposite phase. Okay, and in this case, what happens is delta VH will be negative. So this is for N-type or conductor, whereas this is for P-type. Okay, so by looking at the voltage value, by measuring the voltage and looking at the sign of the voltage, you can see whether, you can say whether the material is a conductor or N-type semiconductor, or if it is a P-type semiconductor. Okay, and look at the definition of delta VH. Delta VH is Vy minus Vx. Vy minus Vx. Okay, next. So I showed you how the charge, a potential difference is created. But then a potential difference means a field. A potential difference means a field. If W is the width of this material, then we can say that there is an electric field between the positive and the negative charge plates. There is a field. And what is the direction of the field? The direction of the field will be from positive to negative. And we'll call this field as Hall field. Hall field will be equal to the potential, Hall potential divided by the width. So that means there is an electric field created. This electric field is called the Hall electric field. Okay, now let us again continue to talk about positive charges going. Because it's a current, no? So more and more charges are there. So what will happen to these positive charges? Now let us see. What will happen to these positive charges means there is an electric field. Therefore, the positive charge will experience an electrostatic force in this direction. And the electrostatic force is going to be equal to the charge of the positive charge into the electric field, into the Hall electric field. And at equilibrium, what happens is this force and this force will become equal and opposite. Once they become equal and opposite, you will see that FB is in this direction, okay, and FE is in the opposite direction. So once both these become equal, no more flow of charges will be there towards the sides. This is an equilibrium situation. Similarly, you can discuss for N-type semiconductor. Now let's write the equation for the equilibrium. At equilibrium, I told you the two forces, magnetic force and electric force, will be equal and opposite. And because the drift velocity is perpendicular to the magnetic field, you can see that FB is Q VDB. Right hand side, without taking into the sign, it will be Q into EH. You can just cancel out this, okay? Or you can see that drift velocity into the magnetic field is equal to the Hall field. And now we are just going to make a substitution. J is equal to NQVT. This you got from chapter number 9. Chapter number 9. So let's just make that substitution here. Instead of drift velocity, we can write J by NQ. Okay, that's how this is coming. So J by NQ into B is equal to, and I just told you that electric field can be written as potential difference divided by the width. So you're getting this. And what is this N? This N is the carrier density or number of charge carriers in 1 meter cube of the material. And what is J? J is the current density. You know that the current density is equal to current divided by the area of cross section. We have seen the width is W, the thickness is T, therefore the area is W into T. Okay, now make that substitution here. And finally, you get Hall potential difference on one side or Hall voltage on one side and all the other terms on the right side. So here you're seeing that the Hall voltage is directly proportional to the current that you're going to pass through the material. And the proportionality constant is going to be B by NQT. B is a constant field that you have applied. N is the carrier concentration of the material. Q is the charge of an electron or hole or proton. T is the thickness. W cancels out. Okay. Now, come to this equation. What you are going to do in the lab today is going to be, after the experiment is explained, you'll see that this equation has a form y is equal to mx. So if you plot Hall voltage versus current, that is, you're going to pass different currents, keeping the magnetic field a constant. So when current increases, the voltage increases. Then you will draw a graph, find the slope of the graph. Slope will be equal to B by NQT. Okay, if I know my B, I know the thickness of the material, I know the charge. So then I can get N. Now this experiment is called Hall effect experiment. Okay, and this Hall effect experiment can do many things. One, it can determine the sign of the charge carrier. A material is given to you, you don't know whether it is N-type, P-type, metal, you don't know what it is. By doing the experiment, you can find out what is the sign of the charge carrier. If the Hall potential is negative, it is N-type or a metal. If the Hall potential is positive, then you know that it is a P-type semiconductor. Okay, next. You can also do this experiment to determine unknown magnetic field. So what do you do there? You have to take a material, a known material whose N value you know, okay, and then perform this experiment. So you know NQT, you can find out B. So you can actually use this to determine unknown magnetic fields. Then you can also use it to determine N. Like for example, here you see, if I know BQT, I can determine N. Then finally, you can also determine what is called the Hall coefficient. Hall coefficient is a constant for a given material and it is equal to 1 by NQ. It is equal to 1 by NQ, where N is the carrier concentration and Q is the charge of a proton, electron, or a hole. Okay, and you can see what will be the unit. You can see that N is going to have a unit meter cube. Therefore, the unit will be meter to the power of -3. So when it goes to the numerator, it becomes meter cube divided by Coulomb. Okay, let's just do one problem. I have a strip of copper which is 150 micrometer thick. So this is copper. We are doing this with copper. 150 micrometer thick. This is T. It is placed in a magnetic field B of value 0.65 T, Tesla, perpendicular to the strip, and the current is 23 ampere. What is the potential, Hall potential? Assuming that there is one charge or one electron carrier per atom. The reason why he is doing this is, you have done a similar problem in chapter 29. In chapter 29, when we did the equation J is equal to NEVD, you were asked to find out the drift velocity for copper, and in that problem, you calculated N. To make you remember, I'll tell you, you calculated N using molar mass, then molecular weight, Avogadro number. Using these three things, you calculated N. That is the formula. Okay, so let's take the same value of N and then write the equation. At equilibrium, magnetic force is equal to electrostatic force. QQ cancels. Then you can write Q delta VH by W. Then you can write VD as J by NQ. Then J can be written as I by WT. So same thing. So finally, you get an expression delta VH is equal to IB by NQT. Now substitute for I is 23, B is 0.65, N is 8.49 into 10 to the power of 28, Q is 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 19, and T is 150 into 10 to the power of minus 6 meters. Substitute everything, you will get your Hall potential as 7.3 microvolt. 7.3 microvolt. It's a small voltage. And please remember, in this case, we have got only the magnitude, but then if you were going to do really the experiment, you would have got a negative voltage because it is a metal. In a metal, the charge carrier is negative. Okay, once we're done with this, let's move to a current carrying wire in a magnetic field. Till now, we talked about what happens to a charge in a magnetic field. What happens to a moving charge in a magnetic field? We have seen it experiences force. Based on the force, we had 5 applications that we have studied. Now, we are going one step ahead. If I have a series of moving charges, what I get is a current. So that means a current carrying conductor can also experience a force in a magnetic field. Okay, and you know that a current is simply a flow of charges with average velocity called the drift velocity. With average velocity called the drift velocity Vd. And the charge experienced by every moving charge is Fb is equal to Q Vd cross B if it is drift velocity. Now keep that with you. Take a wire, stretch it, put it in a uniform magnetic field. There is no current in the wire. This wire will remain straight. It won't experience any force. But look at the next picture. In the next picture, you are going to pass a current I. You're finding that the section of the wire in the magnetic field is going to experience an FB in this direction, and the wire, that force on the charges, moving charges, gets transmitted to the wire, and the wire itself experiences a deflection. Now look at the next picture. In the next picture, you are going to have a current in the opposite direction. That's all. You have a current in the opposite direction. This time you're finding that the magnetic force is going to be in the opposite direction and create a deflection. So you know that a current carrying conductor in a magnetic field will experience a force and thereby a deflection. Now let us see what will that force be. For that, what we do is we'll take a conducting wire. This is a conducting wire that we have taken. Okay, and we put it in a uniform magnetic field. The magnetic field is B, out of the plane of the page. The direction of the current is this. This is the direction of the current. And let us consider a length L of the wire. Let us consider a length L of the wire. We know that it is the electrons which are flowing. Electrons are flowing in a direction opposite. Electrons are going to flow in a direction opposite to the current with a drift velocity Vd. So first we will write what is the force experienced by this one electron. The force experienced by that one electron is going to be minus E Vd cross B, where minus E is minus 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 19 Coulomb. Let us look at the direction. Vd cross B So this should be the direction if it was positive, but now it's going to be negative charge. Therefore, the force is going to be in this direction. Okay. Now, like this, please remember all the charges within this volume will experience a force. Okay. So let's say that there are capital N number of charges. So the net force is going to be capital N into the force because of each charge. Okay. Next, let us try to get an expression for capital N. For that, N is the number of charges in length L. Okay. So let's say length L or charges in volume L into A if A is the area of cross section. Okay. I know that small n is the number of charges per unit volume. In 1 meter cube volume, it is small n. In this volume LA, it is capital N. So how do I relate the two? I can say that capital N will be equal to small n into LA. So the logic is cost of 1 mango, cost of 10 mangoes. Okay, so instead of capital N, I put small n LA, and then the rest of the force expression remains as it is. Now what we do is, you see here some familiar expressions are there, minus E, VD, N. Let's put them together and keep the other things separate. Okay, what is this minus NEVD? In the case of conductor, J equal to minus NEVD. Okay, so what we are doing is, instead of minus NEVD, let us put the current density. Okay, next what we will do is, what is current? Current density is current by area of cross section, or wherever you are writing J into A will be equal to current. So here, take this J and take this A and substitute it with current. So I get the magnetic force on a length L of the wire, current carrying wire, in a magnetic field is IL cross B. IL cross B. Now, I don't have to look at the electron, look at the drift velocity and do anything now. I can simply use the right hand rule. How do I use the right hand rule? I have now put L as a vector. Till the previous step, L was not a vector, but now L has become a vector. What is L vector direction? L vector direction is going to be the direction of the current. L vector direction is the direction of the current. You are treating length as a vector. And now do L cross B. L cross B. Okay, when I do that, I am able to get the direction of the force, and the force is going to pull the wire towards the right of the page. Okay, so this is how you get the expression for the force on a current carrying conductor in a uniform magnetic field B. In the next class, what we'll do is, we'll look at what would be the expression for the or before that, I'll just take 2 minutes. So let's again take the same wire. It's in a uniform magnetic field. Magnetic field is perpendicular to the current direction or the L direction. So look at the direction of FB. FB, L and B will be mutually perpendicular if L and B are perpendicular to each other. Like in this picture, L and B are mutually perpendicular to each other. So that was the case. FB also will be perpendicular to L and B. L and B, and FB will be equal to IL cross B. So it has to be perpendicular to both the L vector and the B vector. Okay, next. What if your L is not perpendicular to B? That also can happen. Okay. Or we can, before all that, we can say FB is equal to ILB sine phi, where phi is the angle between L and the B vector. And you can see that the magnetic force on a current carrying conductor will be zero. Remember, the magnetic field, the magnetic force on a current carrying conductor will be zero in a uniform magnetic field when phi is 0 or 180. That means B is parallel to L vector or anti-parallel to L vector. In both these cases, force will be 0. Okay, so if you want to have a current carrying conductor and you don't want it to experience any force in a magnetic field, what should you do? Put it parallel to the magnetic field or anti-parallel to the magnetic field. And FB will be, the magnetic force will be a maximum and it will be equal to ILB when phi is 90. That's a picture here. Okay, in the next class, what we'll do is, we'll discuss what happens if this wire is not a straight line wire. What if it is a wire like this? Or what if it is a circular loop? All these things we'll see in the next class.